creative ideas for designing assessments to minimize academic integrity offenses. And first of all, I would like to recognize that Dalhousie University is located on the Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, and we are all a treaty people.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Jill McSweeney-Flaherty, and I'm an educational developer at the Center for Learning and Teaching. And I have a few housekeeping items that I'll cover before I hand it over to Joy and we start the session. First, you'll all have been notified that we will be recording the session. We will be sending the link to the recording to all participants, as well as a copy of the slides after the session. For those of you at Dalhousie, you will also be able to view the recording via the Going Online Together Community Brightspace site. As many of you have already noticed, your cameras and mics are disabled. So to engage with your peers as well as the panelists, please follow the link in chat to the session's Padlet. I'll post that in a second. There you can ask a question or leave a comment to the panelists, respond to someone else's post, or engage in additional discussion questions during the webinar. You're also welcome to use the chat feature in Collaborate. Myself and one of the other moderators will respond and then relay those questions to the panelists. If you're interested in engaging in the discussion via social media, please do so during and after the webinar, and don't forget to include the DAHonline hashtag for that conversation. Thank you again for everyone for joining us, and I look forward to spending the next hour with you all. Thank you for coming, and I'm going to hand it back over to Joy.
So this morning we're going to talk about alternative assessments. Traditional assessments such as final exams, timed tests, proctored exams, by design really focus on student dishonesty because we're always trying to catch students doing something wrong. Think about how many of us in our professional lives have been locked in a room with limited or no resources and are asked to solve a problem. These high stakes assessments often increase student anxiety, and they really make them focus on their mark rather than on their learning. So we decided that we were going to present a session for creating alternative assessments. And we want to make sure that we promote collaboration, that the assessments are student-centered, because really that's why we're here. And that we dynamically address the course learning outcomes and therefore eliminate the need for those artificial high-stakes assessments. One of the other things that we're going to talk about is in utilizing scaffolding. And scaffolding, as many of you will know, some of you might not, as step-by-step building assessments such as a research paper in parts, or low-stakes assessments, minor assessments that check for learning all along the way, and collaborative assessments, because we all collaborate in our work that we do on a day-to-day basis, and encouraging students to learn those problem-solving skills together. So we hope that the examples that we provide will ignite your creativity, and as we are all challenged to move to our online courses in the fall, and we want to remain student-centered. So you're probably wondering why we all got together. Well, I was sitting in a meeting about academic integrity and this week of events, and I was thinking about Vilis because he has been teaching for decades at the Faculty of Agriculture and engaging students from the diploma level to the PhD candidates and everywhere in between. And he basically is presenting today because in his not so distant past, he frequently found himself in the academic integrity officer's office discussing student offenses. And he came to realize that if he made a few adjustments, his students spent more time learning and he spent less time catching them making bad choices. And then there's Travis. And he actually joined our team for this session about a week ago, actually on Friday, in part because I was talking to one of his students, and his student was telling me all of the wonderful things that Travis did, particularly when we had to jump online in the winter term, and how he was able to take those alternative assessments and really make them engaging even in an online environment. And then my background is very much just student-centered. I started out as a junior high school science teacher, And I now teach diploma level courses in academic success, communication, and some degree level internship and work integrated learning courses for the Faculty of Agriculture. So that's kind of where we are. And so Vilis, take it away.
Oh,
Vilis, are you there?
Okay, hello.
Yes.
I lost
Okay.
my icons for a second, and my video is starting. So in teaching, there's always been this discussion about how much weight to put on tests and exams versus other kinds of marking. But now that we've gone online, the differences really start to blur, because if students are sitting at home in front of their computer, you can't stop them from reading the textbook or checking things on the internet. And the question comes, how can we design assessments for which it doesn't matter whether the kids read a textbook or check things on the internet? And I'll give you some suggestions that I've learned based on my past experiences in teaching. So for the last 30 years, I've taught various ecology types of courses. These have ranged from courses on concepts to really quantitative ones. And early on, I found that soon after a test or exam, students were forgetting everything. And I realized that students, they spend most of their time on things that you assign the highest value to in marks. And students weren't learning much from studying tests and exams because they crammed and they forgot. So I went completely to weekly assignments, and in the last 25 years, I've had no tests or exams. And the key for making this thing work is the kinds of questions you can ask. And I'll talk about the kinds of questions I've asked and how I've done this in various kinds of courses. So first of all, and I am now looking to so I'm looking for, so first is to ask questions that make them think. And so let me give you 2 examples from my ecology course. And the first is how to apply concept in the real world. This is the kind of thing you can always ask. How do you apply some concept you've been teaching in the real world? So the concept in this case is chaotic versus equilibrium, which is something to do with population dynamics. And if asked in the real world, what would you do? Another kind of one is you test their understanding of a concept. You know, what would happen if? Here the concept is succession. So ask what would happen if you remove some species from an early stage, or transplanted some species from a later stage to an early stage. And so you can ask questions that test their understanding. But you might say, that's a lot of marking. So let me talk to you how you can minimize marking. So mark fast if all you do is read things and assign a number. What takes time is writing comments, which are really crucial for students learning. And I realized that it's writing the same comments over and over again. And I started using something which many of you use, which I sort of call a comment sheet. And so this is a quickie way of summarizing comments. And so this is one example for an assignment which is analyzing research paper. And all I do is tick off the various aspects for each describing paper, how good a job the student did. Very fast for each student, tick this off, check, 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 and I assign a mark. So I'm not using this as a grading scheme or rubric. It's just a way to write comments really quickly for students. Now, another way of minimizing marking is to get students to work in groups. Now, when I was a student, I hated working in groups because sometimes I'd have some jerk that I'm working with, I'm stuck with them all term. Or because there'd be someone who just wasn't pulling their weight, and I thought, well, it's not fair if they get marks for something that I'm doing and they're not doing it. So there's a couple of things that I've managed to do to minimize these issues. And the first is randomization. So nowadays, I randomize group members weekly. And so it's not a complete randomization. This is to minimize overlap so that students don't sit with the students they've been with last week or the week before. So in the current courses, I've got about 40 or 45 students, and students at most are twice a term with someone else they've been with. So they really get to work with everyone in the course throughout the term. So one of the courses I teach, the main purpose is for students to learn to read and understand research papers. So what do I do in Tuesday's class? I give a lecture on the topic, then students break into these randomly chosen groups. They choose papers to focus on. They know the assignment. They go home, they read the papers. Thursday, they come back, and together they answer the assignment in class. Then what I get them to do afterwards is get them to do peer evaluations online. It's really fast and quite simple. I get them grade each student on preparation, which is just like, did they read the stuff? Did they read the paper? And participation. And same as others is, did they do a good job as same everyone else in the group? Or a bit more or a bit less than others, or much more or much less than others. And after that, I turn the marks into numbers and standardize them and adjust their group assignment mark based on that. So what I mean is that on average, if a student did the same as everyone else in the group, then their final mark for that assignment would be just what their assignment was marked. If it does better than their group, then their mark is higher. If their student does worse than the group, their assignment's lower. Now this could be a lot of work to do, and so it's really important to have it automated. And so I've got it set up so that I run one command and the groups are set up automatically and the online evaluation form is set up. And after the students finish, then I run another command and automatically all this is summarized and the marks are adjusted and sent to the students. So I took a long time for me to set this up and really a lot of work, and you don't want to go through that amount of work. Those of you who are at Dal, that Dalhousie has actually hired and trained graduate students to help faculty on the technical parts of online courses. So you just need to go to one of these people and say, look, this is what I need to do. And they'll set it up for you. So you can focus on the teaching and let them focus on the technical stuff. I mean, this is really wonderful. I wish I'd had this when I was setting this course up. So let me talk to you about the advantages of doing things in groups. Besides the fact it's easier for you, but I found the students learn more than when they're working alone. So if you all remember what happened to you when you were first teaching a course, I mean, you learn an awful lot. In fact, you almost learn more when you're teaching someone than when someone teaches you. So what I found that in the groups, the poorer students learn because others teach them. The better students learn, well, because they have to teach the other students. And so I find that really the learning increases. And this is really easy to switch to online. When we went online last term, I found it's really easy to switch. Because in the class, the students were used to working together on group documents. Like in Microsoft Word, if you click the little share button at the top, then students can be typing in the same document at the same time. So they'd be sitting there in front of each other talking, but typing away. And when we went online, they could just go on to one of these video platforms to talk to each other and be typing at the same time. So that switchover worked really, really well. So in summary then, try to ask questions that make them think, because then it doesn't matter if they go on the internet or search things up or not. Also use some kind of way to really speed up writing comments for them. Get students to work in groups and randomize membership. Do peer evaluations, and you have to automate this all. You don't have to spend time in the administration of the groups. Thank you. We'll go on to Travis now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Travis Esau. I'm an assistant professor, mechanized systems in the Department of Engineering at the Faculty of Agriculture. So I teach a variety of courses, undergraduate courses, applied science students, as well as engineering students and graduate students, both courses and modules for those graduate students. So being a mechanical engineer, I enjoy bringing as much real-world industry problems to the classroom as possible. So my goal with each and every one of my classes is to get the students excited about coming to class, whether it's an in-person class or it's a remote class. So what I find is when students are excited, engaged, and focused on the class, then the tasks at hand are less urging the students to start cheating or try and go about the course in a different way. It keeps them engaged and focused and doing their own work. So in my engineering design class, that's a very enjoyable class for both myself to teach as well as the students to take. So they're introduced to a number of industry projects. These are actual industry projects that are needing solving in the industry right now. So each one of the projects are linked to an actual industry personnel or a partner. And what I do is I give the students the flexibility to choose their own project from a list. So there's multiple projects to choose from. So based on the students' interests, they're able to choose a project accordingly. And so that gets them excited about the course topic. With that, of course, like Vilis mentioned, I think group work is very, very important for learning in a variety of different ways. So with the course setup, I allow the students the flexibility to choose their own team members. And I've tried a variety of different things over the years, and I've found that this method works really well because first the students have to choose the project they like, and then they have to find a team that's going to work on that same deliverable. And so when they're looking at their friends to say, listen, let's work on this thing. Well, maybe their friend is interested in a different project. So they don't necessarily get in groups with only their friends. They get in a group that are all concentrated on the same deliverable. They're all excited about that specific industry problem. And so that's one way that I set up the structure of the course to get the students engaged and excited about the tasks at hand. And so rather than assigning traditional tests and exams for this particular course, I put more emphasis on the team environment and the team's ability to justify their methodologies and results through oral proposal presentations and a final project presentation. So this takes place with multiple smaller deliverables throughout the semester, and then a proposal presentation midway through the semester, and then the final project presentation at the end of the semester. So both presentations are conducted in front of an audience, whether that be in person or remotely. Who's in the audience? It would be fellow classmates, but also I always engage the faculty members in the department as well as the industry clients to also take a role in watching these students engage with their results from their studies. So that's one way that I think is very beneficial for the students. They get a lot of great feedback when they're going through these project presentations from the industry clients that they typically wouldn't get if they didn't have those people in the audience. And so this type of evaluation is, I'm going to say, it's similar to how a graduate student's ATC or thesis defense is run, right? There's a series of presentations, or there's a 15 to 20 minute presentation, and then a series of question and answers that are diving into the content of what that student or the group of students is working on. And so that is a really good way, I feel, to get the student engaged in the content, so they come to the presentations understanding each and every component of their task at hand. So I think that's a really beneficial way for students to be engaged in a class. I feel the alternative way of assessing achievements gives the student not only a better real-world experience, but also helps to reduce academic dishonesty, as students are required to think on the spot and also know each and every aspect about the project that's going into those presentations. Students strive to achieve, yes?
I'm wondering, we're getting a little bit of feedback on your mic. I know internet issues have been one thing that we've been struggling with. I'm wondering if you might be able to turn off your camera to see if that will help with the static.
Sure, I can do that, not a problem. How about that? Is that any better?
It's still quite staticky, but perhaps
okay. Let me try this now. How about this? Any better?
It's a little bit better from my end.
Okay, I'll try to continue, and just interrupt me if it's not going as planned. All right, so if everybody can hear me okay, as everyone knows, we had to transition from the in-person classroom environment to online last semester, and so with this course, it was fairly smooth conducting this online with the final presentations.
Yeah, this has actually gotten quite worse. So we might need to switch to Joy's section of the presentation and have you reconnect.
Sure.
I'm sorry,
we can do that. Let me try this one last time. Can you hear me any better now?
No, it's still staticky.
All right, so we'll have to. Yeah, I'm not even using any headset now, and.
Travis, why don't you log out and log in again? And in the meantime, we'll proceed and we'll come back to you. Okay?
Excellent. Yeah.
Thanks. Joy?
Got it. I was negligent when I was speaking before, and I must make sure that I say that Jill McSweeney is also here with us, and she brings to our team some organizational prowess, some behind-the-scenes know-how, and a wealth of knowledge when it comes to ideas and resources, and also great patience as she waited for some of us to catch up. So I was negligent in adding that to our introductions as well. So for me, as I said, I teach some diploma level courses and then some internship courses. And just to answer one of the questions in the chat, depends on my course, but usually it's anywhere from 20 to 40. So I usually start everything that I do with Bloom's taxonomy and SMART learning outcomes and making sure that they're learner-centered. All of my courses that I teach lend themselves to alternative assessments. So I never really started with high stakes exams. For example, in my internship courses, the student, the employer, and I all collaborate on writing individual learning outcomes, and that helps to inform their assessment. And in the upper division internship students, we really hit hard and discuss critical thinking and how they can relate their learning back to their program and what they've learned in their courses. And then they utilize that information and apply it to their unique experience. So that really takes out any academic integrity issues because it really is focused on their unique experience. And I recognize that many of you can't do that. But in all of my courses, really, because I focus on those learning outcomes and because I focus on getting students to guide their own learning, really it leaves the importance of citing their sources in terms of academic integrity. And we discussed that a great deal as well. So, for example, in one of my courses, in one of my communications courses, a few of the learning outcomes are demonstrate conflict management skills, demonstrate effective public speaking skills, and create a professional written communication. And I do need to give you a little bit of background about those students. Many of them are students from farms. They're not really interested in academics per se, but they're brilliant when it comes to putting food on your table. And so I really have to think about the types of activities that are going to help these students and are going to engage these students into achieving those learning outcomes. And then I also have to be creative in how they're assessed because they're not test takers, and they don't want to be test takers. So one of the things that I tend to ponder is, you know, does it require them to acquire specific knowledge? Really, is it their ability to apply that knowledge? You know, does the learning outcome require assessment to the students and like an end product, like a presentation, or the process that they went to, like in my internship courses, their work integrated learning and how they've come to the end and what they learned in becoming a better professional. And then we also have to look at, you know, does the learning outcome require us to assess their writing ability, their speaking skills, their creativity, their use of internet, which is amazing and is something that many of us, I would venture to say, didn't have. I mean, Google would have made my educational journey a lot easier, let me tell you. And then I also need to think about, you know, is a visual component necessary? Are they supposed to work in groups? And is it important for it to be time constrained? And most of the time, no. But in a presentation, absolutely. It needs to have a time constraint on it. But in terms of setting, as I said at the beginning, setting a group of students or setting a student into a locked room and saying, here, solve this problem without any resources is kind of an artificial situation. So let's go back to my learning outcomes for my communications course and keeping in mind about that the students are these farm kids. So, you know, demonstrating conflict management, effective public speaking, and professional written communication. I had to really tie it into these students' experience. And so how I assessed them on these is I had the students utilize their online agricultural bylaws, which are located on many municipal websites. And they had to address a fictional community complaint of their farming practices. They had to do that through a response letter. So we talked about writing professional letters, and that also played into their conflict management. They also had to do a public presentation, basically as if in a municipal meeting and addressing that complaint and defending their farming practices. And many times in my teaching career, I've used peer assessment with rubrics. And so it takes a little time up front, but you really talk to the students and you create the rubric with the students. And so that way, when the students are using that to do that peer assessment, they really understand what that means. And then they also help to decide what makes an excellent presentation. So we've talked about all these different presentations, and we talked about you know, what makes a good presentation or what makes good communication skills. And so the students themselves are able to say, okay, this is an excellent presentation and this is exactly what that looks like. And this is a so-so presentation. And so then setting it up at the beginning, everybody knows what's expected and everybody knows how it's going to be assessed. So that's my experience. And now we can go back to Travis.
All right. Any better the second time around here? Looking for
That-
some positive feedback.
You sound great,
Fine,
Travis.
Travis.
All right, excellent. This gives a great real-world example of communication issues working remotely. So let's hope it works great this time around. So as I was talking about engineering design project and how we switched to the remote teaching environment last semester, one of the things with marking groups that I've always looked at as being a difficult task to do fairly. So with the design project, what I've done is set up a team contract that students are required to sign at the start of the semester that outlines the contributions and time allotment they're going to put towards this course. So if there's an equal amount of work that's expected from each student, they're going to keep that even. If certain students want to work harder and feel that they want to put more into the course than others, then they have to, as a team, decide what percent each person is going to contribute to the class. So you'd be very surprised at how well that actually works. It keeps them motivated. If students know that they want to put into the project as much as they can, it's going to keep them working very hard throughout the semester. So basically it's a method of peer evaluation. So at the end of the semester, they have to revisit that team contract and determine how much work they were able to contribute to the project. And I base their final individual marks based on how much they actually contributed to their team. So if their team got a 80%, some students may get an 85% and some students may get a 75%, for example, if they didn't contribute the same as other members in the class. And that's something that really, I think, helps to reduce some of the academic integrity issues that could take place with a typical group setting where everybody gets the same grade no matter what happens, right? So that's one method that I used. And this next slide shows some of the positive feedback that was received. Actually, all the students were very satisfied with the course and how it moved to an online environment. And so they were able to still complete their projects. Every team had a different project, and they were able to have some time on campus to be able to start working in the machine shop and the wood shop and the 3D printing lab. But when they had to transition to the online world, they were able to wrap up their projects using the ability of what they had at home. So some of them had a bit of tools that they were able to work from their garage on, and so they were able to finish the deliverables that were set aside. So if this course was completely online right from the very beginning, then I would make sure that the projects were able to be achieved through with components that people would have at their home environment. So that's the design course. Another course that I taught last semester that we had to move to the remote environment was engineering dynamics. And so with this course, I used alternative assessment methods to combat academic dishonesty. So one way I did that was to give each student content to independently study and then present to myself and the fellow classmates. So rather than just handing in an assignment or just writing a take-home test, they had to actually talk about what they developed in a real-time video session. And during that video session, there was question and answers that were taking place. Students and myself were asking questions and engaging the student to get to know how much of the content they actually knew. And it went really, really well. And the student feedback was again, very, very positive using this type of alternative assessment method. So that being said, one of the biggest hurdles to teaching remotely is select students that don't have access to reliable high-speed internet. So this fall semester, courses are going to be done remotely, and I'm going to be using asynchronous methods of teaching, since some students may not have the same time zone, they may not have access to high-speed internet all the time. So the real-time lectures and question and answer sessions are going to be more difficult. But depending on the class, there'll be discussions as to how much real-time sessions can actually take place based on everybody's timetables and schedules within the class. So in closing, just a few tips, take-home notes, I'm going to call it. My opinion, students have less chances of being caught for cheating if they're actually engaged and excited about coming to class and that kind of thing throughout the semester. So I try to get them right from the beginning excited about coming to class. Making mistakes, everybody has to know that that's just part of life, and you can actually learn more from making a mistake and picking up where the mistake was and sort of learning from that type of situation. So students need to know that they don't have to have everything perfect every time, right? Everybody can make a mistake here and there and learn a lot from that. And then finally, just in reference to remote teaching, the internet is a major drawback for several people, as well as other communication issues, as you've seen with my audio video feed, especially my sound was glitching. So that sometimes puts a wrench in the online teaching environment. So that has to be taken in consideration when we move to the fall semester and everybody's teaching remotely. So that's it for my side. Thanks very much.
Thank you, panelists. Now we have an opportunity to share some of the questions and comments that were asked on Padlet. Please feel free to also ask questions in the chat, and the panelists can address them. Travis, I have a question for you from one of the audience members. Can you repeat how you grade students based on peers and how you communicate that to them?
Yeah, so how that peer evaluation works is a team contract is developed at the very start of the semester, after the team is compiled, after the project is selected. They set up a team contract, and this is something that would be more seen in the industry environment. So this team contract goes through a variety of different commitments that each person is going to contribute to the project, as well as what their team is going to be expected to do throughout the semester as well. And so how it's set up is the students are going to, if there was 4 students in the team and they all wanted to equally contribute to the project, they would write down that each would contribute 25% of the work towards the project. So that adds up to 100%. If a certain team member knew they were working late hours, they had a second job, or they had a job on the side, and they weren't available as much as the other students were, maybe they weren't going to put as much effort into it, that type of student would put a lower value right off the bat, knowing that they weren't going to be able to contribute to the team's efforts. And so setting that up at the very start of the semester is really great to get an understanding on what's going to take place within the team environment. If you just did that at the end of the semester, there would be conflict, because it wouldn't be, it would be sort of thrown in at the last minute. So at the end of the semester, if certain things have changed along the way, it can be updated. and everybody has to sign their name agreeing that this is the amount of work that was put into it. And so it doesn't work every time, but I've had really, really good luck over the last few years with this type of assessment. So if everybody equally contributed 25% out of 100 to the project, the 4 students, they would equally get the same mark at the end of the semester. But if a certain member did less work, maybe one member did 20% of the work and one member did 30% of the work, had to pick up the slack, then that person that did a little bit better would get a higher mark than the team average. And so hopefully that gives a handle on how that peer evaluation method works.
Thank you, Travis. Something that's been coming through in the Padlet, and I'd like to hear if anyone in chat has any examples of how do you handle a course, say, with 300 students and 1 TA? Perhaps you can give a bit of context to the level and the number of students in each of your courses, and maybe share some tips on how you might be able to translate or mirror some of what you're doing in your own classes into the larger classes with perhaps an instructor and 1 or 2 TAs.
So, Vilis, are you going to take that, or do you want me to? I think it was addressed to Vilis.
Why don't you give a start, and then I'll pipe in afterwards.
Sure. So the Truro campus, we don't have as many 300 student classes as that big Halifax campus would. So my class sizes, especially in the design project, are manageable. So somewhere between the 18 to 30 student mark actually is sort of a good number for the environment that I've been teaching to for these industry projects. If the student number went up, then the team size would probably have to increase just based on lab space and that kind of thing. But I think the same sort of process could be upscaled without too much trouble, in my opinion, anyways. I don't know, Vilis, if you have more experience with larger class sizes of 300, but
I don't have any classes that big, but I'd start experimenting with having, if people work in groups, having groups mark the other group's assignments and see if I can tweak that and make that work. I find actually in the past when students mark each other, they're a lot tougher than I am, and that might be one way to make it work. That's it for me, Jill.
Joy, would you like to comment?
Just to add, in terms of like the rubric idea that I presented, you can utilize that for groups marking each other, and then if you have 5 different groups mark the same assignment or the same presentation or whatever, then you throw out the top one and the bottom one, you average the middle 3, and there you have a fairly good mark for each of those students. So there are ways to do it, but I would just encourage you to be creative and to try because it does work.
Hey, that's a great idea.
Vilis, I know you respond to this on the Padlet, but I'm wondering if you can speak more to the peer evaluation that you use in your course and your alternative assessment. What form do you use? Have you tried using Brightspace at all for the peer evaluation?
I did initially look at using Brightspace, but there's no way to automatically set up the evaluations. Every week I'd have to go and type stuff in myself, and you can't do that if you're changing things. So then I went to Google Forms or something called REDCap, which is social scientists here use, and that's something I could automatically upload the evaluations there each week, because you can't be sitting there typing these things each week when your groups are changing. And this is hopefully something that the tech people that Dallas hired can do that for you, hopefully.
And Travis, you mentioned using peer evaluation in your own courses. Could you maybe speak to how that unfolds and if you use Brightspace at all for that?
Yeah, so with peer evaluation, I did that through, it wasn't through Brightspace. I had a contract that was a template contract that students, each team tweaked themselves, and then at the end they had to sign and then pass a hard copy into me. This fall semester, if I would be doing that course, it's not offered till the winter semester again, but I would definitely be moving to the Brightspace environment and have everything done through that remote software package. But in the past, since it's been in person, I haven't used the Brightspace for grading as much as I would in the online environment.
Thank you, Travis. And Iris Black has a really great question, that some courses do really require memorization and the mastery of basic notions and content of the discipline. I'm wondering if any of the panelists have any suggestions on how you can use alternative assessments to get at that knowledge and understanding, or any suggestions of what somebody who might be doing that in their course could use as an alternative assessment.
So Iris, I realize you can't talk back except for in the chat, but do you mean like basic memorization of language terms? Are you talking about like a Spanish class or a French class? I guess I need to understand a little bit more about what you're talking about. Okay. So essentially, you know, verb conjugations, it's making sure that the students are doing that properly. And so yes, you would need to do that in more of a testing situation, but again, if your students will have access to information or will have access to each other. And so you can set it up so that they can work on things, or they can adjust each other's verb conjugations and make it more interactive, because that's really what you want them to do. You want them to be able to utilize that language.
Yes, so Jennifer McDonald's suggestion of having multiple choice quizzes with autocorrection in there is an interesting way of doing that. It might still be in line with the traditional way of assessing, but you can integrate, again, as Dre was saying, low stakes and scaffolded quizzes throughout the term to help students kind of become more able to engage with tests in ways that limit or decrease academic integrity issues when they feel that, you know, with a heavily weighted final exam, they must, you know, fall into those habits of cheating. I'm sorry, my husband is here trying to disrupt me. Does anyone else have any questions? I know we have about 10 minutes left. I would really encourage you after the webinar to engage with the Padlet. We have the opportunity as a large group with different contexts, with different numbers of people in their classes and different disciplines, to share how we're approaching alternative assessments. This might be very new for some people. It might be very context specific, but it is an opportunity as a community to share and provide examples and hopefully help integrate the opportunity to engage in alternative assessments in our own teaching.
If I can just kind of give a really easy example for people, and some things. So for example, we all go to the RMV or the DMV to write an exam to learn how to drive. And we have the purpose of that exam is to make sure that we know the rules of the road. So the DMV has produced all of these multiple choice exams so that people can't cheat. But what if they produced a video and students had to point out when somebody was doing an infraction? Then if somebody walks out from taking the exam ahead of them and says, hey, look out for the person running the stop sign, that's okay, because really the objective of it is for the person to understand that running a stop sign is not a good idea. And so it doesn't matter that somebody told them that answer, because they still have to find it in the video. So that's kind of a basic example of, if you use different ways, regardless of if somebody tells them an answer, the learning outcome of them understanding that that's an infraction still happened.
So I know we're approaching the time. We wanted to share with the group a couple of available resources and support. So while we do recognize that many of the panelists have talked about integrating alternative assessments into smaller or mid-range class sizes, for those of you who are also interested in thinking about how alternative assessments could work in larger classes, along with you and everyone else, there are supports available for you to help with kind of managing or approaching the increase in workload or administration with that. So Academic Technology Services in the library has virtual drop-in sessions. They happen throughout the week, throughout the day. I encourage anyone who is having issues with Brightspace or would like to know more about the group function that was talked about, the use of rubrics, or the use of questions and quizzes and forums, please feel free to go into that session, and they can help you within your Brightspace page and provide you with on-demand support. As Vilis also mentioned, course builders are now available. So if you're looking at thinking about how to build a Brightspace shell, how to integrate some of these opportunities and the use of some of these tools, the course builders can work with you to help build that in Brightspace, where you can focus on the pedagogy of your course design. The Center for Learning and Teaching also offers consultations. We have a variety of resources online that can support you making this transition. So we have our focus blog, as well as Thursday coffee and teaching chats, where educational developers are there to, again, help with any on-demand questions that you might have. We also have, specifically for the DAL community, the Going Online Brightspace community site, where we're hoping that you'll continue to have this discussion around alternative assessments and academic integrity on there. And we can provide you with, some opportunities to see some examples of alternative assessments. And we're hoping that the community will also share what they're doing in their courses so that we can learn from each other. If anyone has any last questions, I'd like to thank all of the panelists, and I'm going to hand it over to Joy to kind of wrap up the session with a few takeaways.
So thank you all for hanging in there with us. We do hope that you can take away something for your own teaching and promote student learning rather than student dishonesty. Utilize scaffolding, low stakes assessments. Make sure you return to your learning outcomes. And if you're worried about academic dishonesty, try and create assessments that help promote collaboration and focus on integration of knowledge and performance measures. And talk to your students about academic integrity and have fun.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll be here to answer any questions on Padlet or in the chat if you have any. Good luck, and we hope to see you in some of the other webinars throughout the week.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording now.